But I really wrote the book not primarily as a defense of him, but as a defense of the faith community and of individual God fearing, Bible believing Christians who committed the unpardonable crime of voting for Donald Trump.
I'm so glad you can go to the stream. I hope you go there every day, and I pray that you see a stream of wisdom fed by many tributaries. No tributary is the stream, but those gifted by God with great wisdom and insight, love, concern, compassion, and courage are flowing wisdom on the stream every day. I'm talking to Ralph Reed today, the founder of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He founded that, I don't know, about 9 years ago, and he has written a book about God and country. And Ralph Reed is someone that I have known and respected for, let's just say, I got to know him real well back in the Reagan days, even though he was just barely out of his teens when Reagan came in. But boy, has he been a mover and shaker. Ralph Reed, I'm so glad to have you on the stream today.
Thanks so much, James. Always an honor to be with you, my friend.
Well, I want you to tell us about this book, God and Country, because it's about God and country. And I know from you that you think if God is left out, I believe it was Reagan that said, we're a nation under God or we become a nation gone under. And he really did believe that. I know you believe that. You're absolutely convinced of it. Okay, tell us about the book, God and Country.
Well, I wrote the book less as a defense of Donald Trump, although I do plenty of that in the book. And James, I have about a 30-page appendix that details all of the extraordinary accomplishments and achievements by this president, including in the areas of protecting unborn life, advancing religious freedom, standing for the state of Israel, reducing the tax burden on the American family. It's over 30 pages of promises made and promises kept. But I really wrote the book not primarily as a defense of him, but as a defense of the faith community and of individual God-fearing, Bible-believing Christians who committed the unpardonable crime of voting for Donald Trump. And since then, they've been called every name in the book. They've been smeared and lied about. They've been accused of being hypocrites and spiritual frauds. They've been accused of selling out the gospel to get access to power. And all those things, James, are not only false and they're not only smears, they're lies. And I wrote the book to defend them because the truth is, and you know this because you were there, 2/3 of these Christians voted for somebody else in the Republican Party primaries in 2016. He was not their first choice. But once they faced a binary decision between him and Hillary Clinton, and I would argue now Joe Biden, with Supreme Court vacancies on the court or soon to be, and the issues that they care about with such a stark difference, I think they not only made the right political choice by backing Trump and continuing to do so, I think they made the right moral and ethical choice. And that's why I think they're going to vote for him in even bigger numbers in November.
Aren't you a little bit shocked that those of us who are able to go in and sit down with the president at his invitation, that we are criticized for talking to him, and yet we praise Joseph for talking to Pharaoh, who initially had no desire to talk to him? President Trump expressed a desire to hear from those of us who were really serious about God and who were courageous because of our convictions and who were concerned. We had compassion for the well-being of all the American people. Somehow he believed that. I told leaders that this man admires the Jesus that he sees in some Christians. And don't you agree he saw in Christians something that caught his attention even as a New York contractor businessman, and he actually wanted the council. Now for 4 years, we've been able to access at his invitation over and over, or if we had a concern, this president, and he has listened. Why would we be criticized? And yet the prophets who confronted kings, many of whom never wanted to be confronted, and Agrippa was confronted by Paul. Jesus confronted all the powers that be with truth. The New Testament church turned the world upside down because they proclaimed another king, another power source, than Caesar, why would we be criticized for talking to authority and to the king, not only with determination, but at his invitation? Isn't that shocking to you to see how foolish that is?
Well, as I argue in the book, James, there's really one reason why we've been criticized, and not just us, not that those of us who are friends of his or have met with him or counseled him in some way, but anybody who voted for him, anybody who supported him,
Yeah, that's right.
who was a deeply committed Christian, has been trashed. And the reason why is very simple. The media knows, the pundits know, and our critics and his critics know that but for the 81% of the votes of born again, self identified evangelical Christians that he won in 2016, the highest, by the way, recorded in the post World War II political period, he would not have won. And they know that. And by the way, that number is not going to be 81% in 2020. It's going to be higher. And I argue again in the book, For God and Country, that we did that to advance what we believe to be moral goods, like standing with Israel, like defending the innocent unborn, like protecting our God-given right to religious freedom. And you mentioned the apostles. I point out in the book, you know this very well. I'm sure you've taught it and preached it. Then in the 22nd chapter of Acts, when the apostle Paul was placed under arrest for preaching the gospel in Jerusalem, what did he ultimately do? He appealed his case to Caesar.
Yep.
He exercised the most cherished right of a citizen of Rome. Now, we don't have that right as Americans. Can you imagine, James, if in the United States we had a right to walk into the Oval Office and plead our case to the president? We don't have that right. But a Roman citizen did. And because Paul did that, and he exercised that civic right, he carried the gospel to the very courts of the emperor of Rome. And the Bible records that many members of Caesar's household came to Christ as a result. So you see, our engagement and our support for these issues doesn't just advance the moral and the common good, it carries the gospel to the most critical precincts in society.
We do have the right, however, to speak God's word to everyone with ears to hear. And that right is being threatened. And you remember the president said, with thousands of Christians sitting in front of him and very influential church leaders, I'm giving you your voice back. I don't want anyone to ever take away the voice of the church and the voice of you ministers who believe the Bible, who believe there's a God who's Father. So with that great gift of freedom, freedom of speech, the right to preach, I had a very big meeting around that theme, freedom of speech, the right to preach. And we defeated the fairness doctrine because of the challenges that came against me. We have the right to speak out.
Yes.
This president is wanting to protect and preserve that.
Yes.
What do you think will happen if we choose the opposite candidate?
Well, I think that Joe Biden is already on record publicly as having criticized the Little Sisters of the Poor decision that the Supreme Court recently rendered, and has publicly said that if he becomes president, that the Obamacare conscience mandates on ministries and faith-based organizations will be reimposed. And what that means in effect, James, it'll be litigated. And, we don't know what will happen. We're hoping, of course, that none of this happens. But if that were to happen, the Little Sisters of the Poor would again be subject to fines totaling up to $70 million. Notre Dame University, Liberty University, family-owned businesses of Christians like Hobby Lobby would be compelled by our government to provide health care and medical services that violate their faith and assault their conscience, including abortion inducing medication. That is what would happen. And as we saw during the Obama administration, most people don't remember this, but the Obama administration went all the way to the Supreme Court arguing that a Christian school should not be allowed to hire and fire its own teachers. So if you want to see a full scale assault on the church and on ministries and on the right to share our faith and not have our religious freedom imposed upon, which we should be clear, James, this is not just a constitutional right. This is a God given right. This is a right that is inherent to our very humanity. It's why our forebears fought to be free and why they gave their lives. So this is not an insignificant issue. The choice could not be more stark. And we have a president and an administration that is defending religious liberty, not only here at home, but all over the world.
Ralph, thank you for what you said. I want you just in a real brief statement. What do you believe people get if they read the book God and Country? It's not going to be a matter of just, let's say, exalting what you watched Mr. Trump do, but what's really at stake? What do you believe they'll take away when they read the book?
I think there are a lot of Christians out there who support the president and his policies, but they get criticized and they're not really sure what all the arguments are. And I think this book will equip them with the arguments and the information, including things that come from behind the scenes encounters and meetings with the president as to why they did the right thing in 2016 and why they're doing the right thing now. I think that's what they'll get out of the book.
God and Country, Ralph Reed. It's in the bookstores. You can get it online, and I pray you will, and I pray you'll share it. Encourage everyone that cares about God and country, everybody that cares about faith, family, and freedom, to get the book and read it. God and Country by Ralph Reed. Ralph, thank you so much for being with us today on the stream.
Thank you, James.